Hello YouTube. Bane666 here. As most of you probably know, I started this series of videos to expose the lie that Elliot Rodger was connected to the men's rights movement. But I am now expanding it to cover any falsehoods, misconceptions, misinformation, or outright lies spread about the MRM. So let's get stuck into it.
Rights conference in Detroit, fueling feminist outrage, even comparing the gathering to hosting a hate group.
So are the angry feminists proving they're waging a war on men by being so intolerant? Joining us now is Suzanne Venker, author of The War on Men. Suzanne, nice to see you, as always, on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so what do you make of these feminists, these professional feminists, as Tucker calls them, outraged over this group of men getting together to talk about things like finances? In fact, at this event, they had female speakers and all sorts of different races.
Oh, it was undoubtedly the most diverse group that I have ever been among at one time. It was fantastic. Males, like you said, males, females, black, white, liberals, conservatives, atheists, Christians. I mean, all united for one very specific reason, and that's to talk about the needs of boys and men, which are terribly underrepresented today. So it's almost comical to think about the lashing out that feminists did, because the actual conference couldn't have been more opposite of what they claimed. And you can actually watch the conference yourself if you want online. They have it available, so anybody could go in there and see for themselves what the conference was all about, which I actually highly recommend people do, because it was just a wealth of information by some fabulous folks.
Suzanne, why are they acting out then, if that's the case?
Okay, so the biggest divide between what's called the MRAs, the men's rights activists, and feminist activism is really very simple, and that is that feminists blame all social ills, all the problems that we have, really, especially regarding marriage and the family, education, jobs, and the like, on the patriarchy. You know, whenever something goes wrong, it's the man's fault, and it's the system, and it's all messed up. When men's rights activists come together to truly address these problems, all they're interested in is just solving the problem. And these people that were on the panel at this press conference the other day are in the trenches in various arenas, and they are doing great work to solve problems completely irrespective of ideology. So if you're married to an ideology that says the patriarchy is real and that women are always the victims, and you never are able to look at women in any kind of critical way and admit that they can do wrong too, you can't solve these problems regarding boys and men.
Well, and also, Suzanne, it's a whitewashing of gender. I got slammed here when I mentioned on the show a few months ago that actually genders are different. Some liberal blogs wrote about me saying that. Outrageous that there are differences between men and women, biological differences that we should be embracing, not trying to whitewash, and that's what these feminists want to do.
Those are the two things. That they're stating that there's no differences between women and men, and the fact that the patriarchy is alive and well and, out to get you, so to speak, and we have to, in order to achieve equality, redo our entire system. So the point is, anytime someone tries to speak out and address the real issues that revolve around the male-female relationship, marriage, family, domestic violence, by the way, goes both ways. People don't know that because feminists own the dialogue when it comes to these topics. The assumption is that women are always victims and men are the perpetrators. That is absolutely statistically false. And that's what just one example of what this conference shows.
Where can people go and watch that conference, by the way? Is it posted online somewhere?
So if they go to the conference was put on by A Voice for Men, and they've become pretty much the dominant men's group globally. And we had people there from Australia, by the way, the UK, from Maine to California to the South, and it's called A Voice for Men. So if you go to avoiceformen.com, everything's there, and you'll find it, and you can make up your own mind what you think about men's rights and what's going on here, because we feel that it was a very pivotal.
Wow. I'm not a big fan of Fox, but I've got to say that that's the most positive and unbiased coverage of the men's rights conference I've heard so far. And then there was this.
My name is Karen, and I am an anti-feminist. Yes. I know, the short hair and the comfortable shoes really gave it away. You know, a lot of people think that we're sort of the women's auxiliary of the men's rights movement. Sort of take a back seat and be a good ally. Like, we're not MRA allies, and we're not MRA supporters. We're MRAs. Feminism wants to pretend that men are a monolithic perpetrator class and women are a monolithic victim class, but that just isn't the way it works in the real world. So that's really why I oppose feminism, why I try and, pick it apart and try and do my best to discredit it wherever I can. So
she's a superstar, You got to get her autograph.
I got sort of semi-involved about 5 years ago, quite by accident, stumbled across a website, and it was the men's rights subreddit, and started commenting there, and then I started blogging, and then when people refused to believe that I was a woman, because no woman would think the way you think, and no woman would believe the things that you do, that's when I started doing videos, just to sort of, I am actually a woman. So I started gaining subscribers exponentially. And then my channel itself, the videos on my channel, have something like 5 million views. Really, society places men dead last every time. And society expects men to place themselves dead last every time.
There's a long history of women who advocate against the feminist movement's goals. And I think a lot of those have found like-minded people in the men's rights movement. I think if you look at the communities online, there are women who participate in them, like there are men who participate in feminist groups. But I think for the most part, you'll find that they're overwhelmingly male.
I would like to point out that I am the third presenter to speak at the first annual International Men's Human Rights Conference. And that would be the third woman presenter.
Women who are in support of this movement gives credibility to it. These are not women who are cowering and saying what they're saying because they think they have to please their men. These are strong individual women, and they're saying that these things are going on. That gives it credibility.
We deify mothers, even the bad ones, to the point where it's become what I like to call the golden uterus syndrome.
The golden uterus is a term that came up in an online group I belong to of mostly stepmoms who their husbands' first wives have what is referred to as a golden uterus, meaning she thinks that she knows everything just because she was the first wife and the biological mother of a gentleman's children who cannot be questioned and is never wrong. The problem is, in the family court, it's incredibly biased in favor of mothers, and they exploit that system. They know how to leverage it. I would just like to say that I think our society as a whole is very uncomfortable with men who are in pain, because it goes against our beliefs that men are supposed to be strong and stoic.
The whole business of persecuting men, of demonizing boys, of failing to educate, that has been a huge fraudulent movement. And we need to name names, and first on my list is Hillary Clinton. And I accuse her of being one of the leaders of this fraudulent movement.
MRAs tend to blame feminists for a wide variety of things. They think feminists are discriminating against boys in school. They think feminists are responsible for many of the divorce laws. They think feminists are responsible for the domestic violence laws that they think are biased against men. And they think feminists in general are responsible for sort of a cultural movement that devalues males and masculinity in general. I wish feminists had as much power in society as MRAs think, but I think the truth is that we as a society are moving towards gender equity. And if you're coming at this from a historical position of privilege, it can be difficult when you see that privilege eroding.
That's me. I don't really think that you have to be fearless to be a female MRA, a female men's rights advocate. I think it's actually you have to be much more fearless to be a male MRA.
I have to say, that Fusion piece was pretty good. It's a shame more media didn't take a similar, unbiased, open-minded attitude. Speaking of which, we are now moving on to the bad. And nothing quite sums up bad as this. inside the first International Conference on Men's Issues. By Bucky Turco. There were no protesters outside the modest lakefront veteran lodge in St. Clair Shores, just outside Detroit, Michigan. The very official-sounding First International Conference on Men's Issues was relocated here from a downtown hotel, because of what the organizers alleged were death threats, but was later reported by local media to be space limitations. By the time yesterday's planned 3 p.m. press conference got going 25 minutes late, there were only about 30 people in the audience, most but not all, white middle-aged men. A handful of them were reporters. The rest were true believers in a war on men. There was a disco ball in the center of the hall, draped with white paper streamers. Okay, where to start? Well, we have the mostly white middle-aged men claim that we see so often in the media. As I said in my last video, considering that America is 3/4 white, and the conference is a men's issues conference, you would expect it to be mainly white and male. But as we saw in the Fox clip, it wasn't exclusively white, nor exclusively male. This, mostly white male, line that we hear from so many hack journalists is just a cheap way of implying that MRAs are part of a privileged elite, or that MRAs are somehow bigoted. The race, sexual preference, and even gender, of those who attended is not what's important, the issues are what's important. This is just another distraction. As for the death threats, well, let's read on. Point the camera that way and that way only, said one of the 3 security guards armed with superfluous walkie-talkies, reprimanding someone taking video footage of the attendees, which was prohibited. The organizers introduced the speakers at great lengths, taking pride in their various appearances on Fox News. A Voice for Men founder and conference organizer Paul Allen stated that the cop cars parked outside were there because of more death threats. This is where I have to be particularly blunt. When you drove in here today to the parking lot, you saw a police presence, because we became under death threats. For this conference, this panel of people. I'm getting tired of the death threats, shouted a staff member. Outside, I spoke to St. Clair Shores officer David Burmeister about the alleged death threats. He said that no specific threats have been made at all. The cops were contracted to be there by a Voice for Men. It appeared that they weren't there to protect them from specific and imminent danger but to give the illusion of it. The rest of the article is made up of quotes from the conference. So it seems that Bucky wasn't taking the death threats seriously. I'll let you ponder if he would have taken the threats seriously, if they were towards a feminist conference. As for a response to these claims, I think it's better to let Dinas May speak for himself.
Bucky Turco actually wrote 2 stories, and the more egregiously inaccurate one, in my opinion, just as an opinion, was that he said that he asked the cops if there were any death threats, and they said no. I don't think that he asked sufficient questions to get an answer on that. As a journalist, what are some questions you might ask me about these so-called death threats?
Well, first of all, I would ask, where did the death threats come from? How did you hear about these death threats?
Well, we're not 100% sure where they came from. What we got was a registered letter from Shannon Donovan of the Doubletree Hilton saying there were death threats and threats to property damage. That's how we heard about it.
So then, when the person from the original location where you were going to have the event told you about these death threats, what did she suggest you guys do about that?
She sent us a registered letter and said we were required to hire police protection.
And this would have been for the event when you were going to host it at the Doubletree in Detroit. Is that correct?
That's totally correct.
Okay.
So, and we did some research and we found out how much money that would cost, and we did a fundraiser to raise that amount of money, and we told people we needed it for security, to hire police, and to hire some lawyers to help us out. That's what we did in the fundraiser.
As per the Doubletree's requirements.
That's right.
So why did you not have the event at the Detroit Doubletree and instead move it to the VFW Hall in St. Clair Shores then?
That's a pretty obvious question you would think a reporter would ask. The reason is that even though we had raised the money and let them know we were looking into hiring the cops, the Doubletree kicked us out anyway.
Because of the threats?
We're not clear. Basically, they gave us 5 days to come up with all of this, and even though we had the money, we didn't have everything lined up perfectly They didn't appear to want to give us an extension. They just sent us a note and say, if you don't have this all finished by 5 p.m. on this day, you're done. And we were still struggling to get everything lined up. So they didn't want us anymore.
So you relocated to St. Clair Shores, the VFW hall, and because you had the money raised and because you took as any serious person would do, you took the death threat seriously. I'm understanding then that you hired St. Clair Shores police officers to be at the St. Clair Shores event. Is that correct?
It seemed wise. We had told people we wanted the money for police protection and lawyers and security in general. Well, let's use it for what we asked for it for. And so we had to give it to St. Clair Shores Police. And
well, that would explain why maybe the St. Clair Shores Police who were hired to be at the event weren't maybe not aware of the death threats because the death threats were made to a hotel in Detroit.
Well, yeah, actually, I can tell you that we did report that there were death threats to the St. Clair Shores Chief of Police, which he can verify. Anybody doing journalistic fact-checking could call the St. Clair Shores Police Chief.
One phone call to the police chief.
And say, were you informed about that? We'd probably say yes. But I would think the average cop sitting there at the event would have said, well, no, we haven't heard anything, because they wouldn't have. Because
they were just
they pulled the note.
Boots on the ground. They were sent to
that
be
would
at
be
the
my
event,
opinion.
and that's it.
So if somebody wants to do more investigation, maybe they want to do that. But I would think that those were solid questions a journalist would ask, wouldn't you, John?
Absolutely.
You still taking notes, Bucky?
So, Dean, I heard that initially the reason you guys relocated the event is that there wasn't sufficient facilities or space at the Doubletree, Detroit. Is that correct?
Yeah, we did originally report that as the reason or one of the reasons. That's because we didn't want to get the Doubletree people in trouble. We were still hoping to maintain a good relationship with them. In point of fact, it is true. The Doubletree misrepresented their capacity. They only had capacity for a 175 when they had told us they had capacity for 250. They had misrepresented that, and that's one of the things our lawyers sent them a note about. The truth is we probably would have found a way to stay there anyway. So, but the fact that we moved to VFW did mean we had more space. And by the way, whatever...
And a glitter ball.
And a glitter ball, yeah. And by the way, despite the misreporting of several places, we had attendance total in excess of that. The VFW gave us a lot more room. The VFW gave us extra rooms, so we had 2 rooms upstairs in addition to the main hall.
For the breakout sessions.
So in a way, it was a mixed blessing, even though it made our lives hell. So, yeah, the move was... we really wanted to be soft-pedaling it, I've got to admit. We were trying to soft-pedal it to be nice to the Doubletree and Shannon Donovan at first and say it was just for that. But the fact is, no, it was more than that. Because we hadn't raised the security stuff fast enough, they made us leave anyway. Right. So.
Of course, this whole thing spilled over onto Twitter, which eventually led to this phone call between Dean Ismay and Bucky Turco.
That had the badly behaved kids, right? And that made your wife sit outside the main audience area? Just want to confirm that was you.
Nope.
Right, you're the guy who met and shook hands, and your kids were, like, pulling people's, like, lanyards, and then you made your wife sit outside in the main audience area? That's you, right?
Nope. Sure isn't.
Okay.
Let me wait.
Anyway, moving on, Dean. Moving on. Because,
let me clarify something. No, let me clarify something for you, Bucky. And by the way, I'm not mad. I think we have a disagreement, and we're sniping back and forth on Twitter, and that always gets on, inhuman. So let me just clarify something. That was my ex-wife you were talking to, and her husband.
Okay.
That was and you're sniping back with Rosemary Ribner now. That's my ex-wife. So I'm just getting it clear for you. Also, I'm not mad at you. I just think you made an error. So, but anyway, go ahead. What do you want to talk about?
Because you keep saying that I made an error. So I just and you're calling me a dumbass on Twitter. It's all fine. Like, again, the things you guys say kind of just rolls off my back. But on the Voice for Men website, International Conference on Men's Issue from June 26th to June 28th. June 26th was your press conference for your conference, your press event for your conference. You cannot separate your press event for a conference you're having from the conference you're having. I'm just like, I don't see your logic here. So all the speakers that spoke, the only difference between them speaking at the press event and them speaking at the conference was allotted time. They spoke for 5 minutes each, but at the conference they spoke for longer. But all the speakers for the press event, for the conference, were, I just don't see your logic. So I'm just love to understand your logic here.
Okay. All right. First off, we did meet. We did shake hands. Then you went out and talked to John Ribner, my kid's stepfather, and my sons were there, and her son with him was there, and that's who those folks were. And you had a little interview with John. You never interviewed me, just so we're getting that straight.
But you wrote on Twitter that you spoke to me personally.
I did, because we shook hands when you came in. You said, I'm Bucky Turco. I was standing there next to my wife at the ticket counter, my current wife, and I said, oh, hi, Bucky Turco. That's it. We didn't have any.
Okay, so in other words, we actually didn't really converse. But okay, continue on, sir.
We shook hands and said hi. Now, Bucky, you said all kinds of,
That's not what you said. You quoted me as saying, don't you know all the men have the power? So you actually never spoke to me, and you said on Twitter you did.
John P. Ribner.
These are
Bucky, go read the article by John Ribner. He's the one who quoted you as saying men have all the power and said that was dumb, which, by the way, it is. If you said it, you should just acknowledge that's a dumbass thing to say, because we don't.
Obviously, men don't have all the power because, like every world leader and every leader of every financial institution, political institution, and religious institution, but clearly men are unrepresented. But moving forward.
And that gets into, all the homeless men, all the suicides, all the men dying in trenches, all the victims of genocide, who are mostly male, most murder victims are male, etc. But we can just ignore that because the president is a man. Okay. We understand your ideological agenda and what you're really about, and that you're not a reporter, you're an opinionator. Understood. And, of course, you called us names and said dumb things about us and claimed you were inside the Men's Rights Conference when you were not inside the Men's Rights Conference. We had a different set of speakers, some of them the same, some of them different. They were billed separately, getting in got separately. All you got to do, Bucky, is say, okay, we have a disagreement. I think your press conference was part of the main event, but I admit I did not attend most of your conference. Because admit it, Bucky, we had a 3-day conference and you were there for 2 hours top.
You can hear the emotion in Dean's voice here. And I have to say, I totally understand what Dean must have been feeling. And no doubt, most of you can as well.
Dean, so here's, I guess my retort would be, any press conference, any press event for a conference you're having is part of that conference, and it's per your exact date on your website. So why would you write on the website? It's still here. International Conference on Men's Issues, Detroit, June 26 to 28. Why am I reading that on your own website? And now you're telling me that, no, that press event somehow is disconnected from the conference. And if that's your only thing, because I knew the way you guys have been, 80% of my article is the crazy shit that your speakers said with no color, your quotes straight up, and yet you guys are still claiming media bias, that's it's kind of what you guys do.
I'm not claiming media bias.
It makes no sense.
I'm not claiming media bias. I'm claiming media inaccuracy. You want an explanation? I'll give it to you. Go look at the same thing you're linking. Here's what it says. We take great pride in the fact that despite horrific threats, lies, and tremendous obstacles, a Voice for Men's first international conference on men's issues on June 27th and 28th, 2014 was a smashing success. And it goes on to talk about the press conference the day before and Warren Farrell's workshop the day before. So, it was about all the events during that time. It was a separate charge to get into the conference. You were actually given a free ticket at your request to the conference. All press was welcome to the press conference. You requested a press pass to the conference and got one and didn't use it. You could have been there at the whole 2-day event, but you weren't. Now, all we mentioned was that you weren't.
5 minutes. Dean, I listened to 5 minutes of what they said, and it was absurd. Why would I return to listen to 3 hours of what they said? To torture myself?
Okay, Bucky.
So listening to someone speak for 5 minutes is enough information to form an accurate opinion of a 3-day conference? Wouldn't that be like writing a book review, based on nothing but the blurb on the back of the book?
May I quote you as saying you only listened to 5 minutes of what they said? In fact, I am going to quote you on that.
Dean, you can quote me on whatever the fuck you want to quote me on. That's all the time that you allotted each speaker, except for the first one. Each speaker was given 5 minutes. So I listened to their 5 minutes of insanity, and then of course I didn't want to return to listen to 30 minutes of insanity. Only MRAs would do that.
So you asked no follow-up questions, and you did not actually attempt to attend the event. I understand. You were at a press conference.
I attended the press event for the conference, which by any rational thinking person would say, yes, that is part of the event.
We don't agree.
You can't have a press event for a conference and then separate it from the conference. Only in your mind, where you guys make up reality, does that make any sense?
So using Bucky's logic, if someone attended a press conference for a new movie, it would be the same thing as seeing that movie. Or if someone attended the press conference for a boxing match, there would be no need to attend the actual boxing event.
Would we let people in free to the press conference and charge them to get into the main conference?
Why would you guys have an event that thinks that men are losing their power in the world? I don't know.
Why would we charge? Okay, so you have no answer to the question of why we would charge for the conference, but would have a press conference that anybody could get. So you got no answer to that. And you think that everything that we said is stupid, so you really didn't have to listen or do any follow-up calls.
Dean, if I want to get advice on a ride-on mower, I'll call you. Otherwise, you're really not a good source for anything.
Well,
Bucky, I guess just anyone can call themselves a journalist these days. Well guys, as I've said before, these videos usually take some time to put together. And what you have seen so far was completed about a week and a half ago. I just haven't had time to finish it until now. Not to mention, I think I've been subconsciously avoiding the next part, because so far, we have seen the good, we have endured the bad, and now it's time to face the ugly. And trust me, it's pretty fucking ugly. Okay, let's get it over with. Where to start? Okay, I guess I should start with. It happened to me. I went on a date with an MRA, and he assaulted me when I wouldn't have sex with him. This piece of fiction was written by Anonymous, and tells the harrowing tale of a young woman, brutalized while on a date with a men's rights activist. And you did hear me correctly when I said fiction, as although the author claims it to be fact, it does read like poorly written fiction. While going through this article, ask yourself, does this sound like the words of someone who was assaulted and could have been raped? Or does it sound like a poorly written story designed to slander the men's rights movement? Case in point is the first paragraph. Like you, I've had many dating missteps. From the guy who laughed at me because I never played Grand Theft Auto, to the guy who pinched my cheeks and kept calling me baby face, to the guy who knocked over a bottle of red wine on the white sundress that I bought specifically for the date. Let me ask you a simple question. If you had been through what Anonymous claims to have been through, as we will soon read, and you were going to write an article about it, would you start the article off like this? Kind of light-hearted and jokey, talking about spilling wine on a sundress? This doesn't sound like someone who has been through a traumatic experience to me. But let's continue. I thought that I'd experienced the full gauntlet until I found myself on a date with a men's rights activist. MRAs, as they're known throughout the blogosphere, have one unifying thread, a deeply ingrained disdain for women. Some want to punish women, others want women to solely pursue domestic interests like cooking, sewing and the like, while others just want to bang and discard as many women as possible. Once again, pure fiction. If MRAs have such a deep disdain for women, then why were 1/3 of the speakers at the recent men's rights conference female? Why are so many female MRAs so popular? Utter bullshit. And it's just laughable to suggest that MRAs want women trapped in traditional domestic duty. And then we have the bang and discard claim. This is just another attempt at shaming language, a pathetic attempt to paint us as sex-obsessed users. Using someone for sex and then discarding them afterwards, is as much a tenet of the men's rights movement, as it is a tenet of feminism, in other words, not at all. So already we have a number of unsupported stereotypes. Next. I met him while I was at work, a customer at the clothing store I worked at. He was forward and just charming enough for his approach not to register as negative on my radar. After ringing him up, he exited the store only to return a few minutes later stating that he'd forgotten to pick something up. My number. It was brazen, and typically that makes me recoil, but I've been single for a while and was flattered by the attention. We scheduled a date for the following week and texted frequently in the interim. I know that you'll be tempted to, but please don't keep a red flag count as you read on. This is also an appropriate time for a trigger warning, so please read on with that in mind. Many of the texts focused on how excited he was for our date, as well as comments about my body. He would punctuate mildly explicit comments by stating how honest he was. Honesty, he would tell me, was his favorite quality. The date went well. Some smiles, some flirty touches, your standard, mildly nervous, I think I might be attracted to you kind of first date. He repeatedly made mention of his dislike of females who played games. To which I repeatedly, albeit naively, responded that it was a real date and not a game. At one point, he described himself as a red pill. At the time, I was unfamiliar with the vernacular. After he said it, I went to the bathroom and Googled it. I came up with hits for the red pill subreddit and read a few posts. I found out that red pill is MRA speak for men who have seen the truth of devious female ways. The phrase is taken from the Matrix films. You know, take the blue pill or take the red pill. Stay in happy oblivion or see the truth. Although it's true that MRAs use the term red pill, we are not the only group that does so. I have seen it often with MGTOWs, and correct me if I'm wrong, but don't the pickup artists use it as well? And I am sure there are other groups, not to mention individuals who are not part of any group, who also use the term. I would imagine that if I was on a date with someone, and they used a term that I was unfamiliar with, instead of a clandestine trip to the toilet to do some secret Google snooping, I would simply ask them about the term. It's called conversation. And it's interesting that she claims to have formed her opinion of this guy, based on some negative posts on an online forum, most likely written by someone other than her date, instead of basing her opinion on the previous week's flirty text messages, which she seemed to have enjoyed, and the actual date itself. Next. I realize this isn't ironclad evidence of his MRA status, but I have never heard that red pill terminology used elsewhere. You can read a summary of the woman-hating movement here. So she admits that she has no evidence that he is an MRA, apart from a single term he used on the date. Sounds perfectly legit. To be fair, if I was on a date with someone, and she started to use terms like patriarchy, or rape culture, although the wise move might be to go to the toilet, and not come back, knowing my nature as I do, I'm sure I would just come out with, so do you consider yourself a feminist then? And I'm sure the conversation would be all downhill from there, and we would end up being banned from the restaurant. If however, I was on a date with someone, and she popped out the wage gap myth, it wouldn't necessarily mean she was a self-described man-hating feminist, she might have just been misled by feminists and the media. I think it's safe to argue that red pill is not synonymous with the MRA. And I think it's also safe to argue that it would have been simple for her to just ask him. Not that I believe this story is even real, or that the guy even exists. But you get my point. As for the link she provides, the article says about the red pill. The red pill is a collection of ideas encompassed by what its subscribers refer to as the manosphere, a number of loosely associated blogs that focus on masculinity and personal philosophy for men. And for red pillars, genuine reality goes something like this: female oppression is a myth and men are the ones holding the short end of the stick. That said, men and women are inherently different due to evolution, so each gender should carry out its designated role in society. For example, females should raise children at home and men should work and have sex with women. Red pill pays a lot of attention to that last part about sex. Conversations on the forum are often about one's strategies for attracting mates, but there's a present slightly lesser focus on self-improvement as well. And pickup style artistry is often emphasized as the effective way to talk to and ultimately copulate with women. It's called game, one's strategy in approaching someone for romantic purposes. I did however find one reference to the men's rights movement in the very long article. It says, "For a group of socially aware individuals disappointed in the current state of gender relations, there's not much activism, so to speak." By Morpheus's own admission, Red Pill doesn't do much offline. We're definitely a little different from the men's rights movement in the sense that we don't seek to fix society or our government, he said. In fact, a lot of us feel that things are beyond fixing. Sure, it'd be nice if reproductive rights were equal between women and men, but nobody's holding their breath about it. There was also one reference to MGTOWs. This is a school of thought similar to Red Pill that's all about being a man who will not surrender his will to the social expectations of women and society, because both have become hostile against masculinity. A fully realized MGTOW, there are levels to it, is someone who shuns all relationships with women, short-term, long-term, romantic, and otherwise. He eventually shuns society as a whole. For all intents and purposes, he does not exist. An urbanite might keep to his own apartment, while someone further out may simply head into the wilderness and go off-grid. Link to full article below. So to prove how evil this Red Pill MRA was, Anonymous directs us to an article which states that the Red Pill is different from the men's rights movement. In other words, her evidence contradicts her claim. I guess that gets her a big fat fail, right there. But let's continue anyway. Next. I chose to end the date there. He sulked when I tried to say goodnight. Stay, he repeated over and over and over again like someone trying to train a dog. He pawed at my waist and my hips. Give me a chance. I gave him his chance, the date was his chance. I gave him a polite kiss on the cheek as a token of appeasement and left. And here we see the all too common false stereotype of MRAs, that feminists love to use. You know the one, where all MRAs are just desperate losers who will resort to aggression if refused. You know, all emotion, no logic. Come to think of it, that kind of reminds me of another group. Next. Nearing my car, I heard him call out, "That's it." I felt a forceful grab on my arm as my body jerked backward. I tried to free myself from his grasp to no avail. I drove 2 hours for you. My cock is hard. What are you going to do about it? Heart race. Vision blur. Head pound. Run. As I again tried to pull away, he gripped tighter, leaving nail marks in my arm. Oh boy. What can I say about this? I suppose if something like this did really happen, obviously a traumatic event, and she chose to tell the world about it online, she wouldn't have started her article joking about spilt wine on a sundress. Who knows, maybe it's just me, but I would think that after an assault, and potentially what could have been a rape, I would be angry and outraged, or possibly traumatized and withdrawn. What I wouldn't be is light-hearted and jokey at the start of the article. But she does have a picture as evidence. If we look at the wound patterns on her left arm, it almost looks like someone inflicted them with their own right hand. If we have a close look at the picture, we can clearly see the curvature of the nail marks, once again suggesting these marks were done with her own right hand, and were self-inflicted. I admit this is speculation on my part, and that it is possible that these marks could have been inflicted by another person, but she would have had to have had her left arm facing outward away from her body. If she was being assaulted as she claims, I think it would be more likely that she would move her arms inward, instinctively to protect herself, and if this was the case, the nail marks would be reversed to what we see here. This of course, admittedly, is just speculation on my behalf. But considering all we have been presented with so far is false stereotypes, and a link to a website that contradicts her claims, not to mention the tone of the article, which doesn't seem to reflect that of an assault victim, I don't think it's unreasonable to question the validity of her photograph. But as always, I will let you make up your own minds. Next. He tried repeatedly to get me into his car. With his free hand he tried to lift my shirt, to fondle something. He said that I was untrained. He said that I owed him for the drive. A drive, mind you, that he suggested and made willingly. He kept pleading that I wasn't giving him a chance to prove himself. Really, he was misunderstood. He only thought I was hot and wanted to live in the moment. Why did I have to be so cold? Why couldn't I live in the moment too? He begged to experience me. As his grip continued to tighten, I couldn't yell anymore. I couldn't think, but my body knew what to do. With the closeness of our bodies, I threw the only punch that I've thrown on something other than a punching bag, a tight body shot to the rib cage. The punch landed with a small sound, sending a shock through my knuckles. I don't normally advocate violence, but when your bodily autonomy is in jeopardy, you're entitled to fight to preserve it. His grip loosened just enough for me to wrestle away. I darted toward my car without turning back. Shaking to the point where I could barely turn the key and crying in gasping sobs, I sped off, nearly bottoming out on the nearest speed bump. My phone beeped as I sped home. It was him, asking why I was playing hard to get. I ignored it as I did the following texts where he called me a bitch, a slut and a tease. I ignored the text after that in which he begged for forgiveness and a chance. I turned off my phone until the next morning. I'd received several texts from him overnight, ranging from the benign hello to the wildly inappropriate penis photo with the caption, "This is what you missed out on." I received a text later that day asking me to meet him for a drink and maybe more. All this, because he drove 2 hours. All this, because he complimented me all night. Look, I know there are arseholes out there. I'm not in any way suggesting that shit like this never happens, but if you are going to make up a story about it, at least write it so it sounds believable. This just sounds like fiction to me. It plays on just about every negative false stereotype about MRAs. You know, the sex-obsessed loser who can't get laid, so he hates women, and is most likely violent and a rapist. I'm just surprised he wasn't wearing a fedora, living in his mother's basement, and was a close personal friend of Elliot Rodger. But I have to ask the question, if this story was actually true, if these events did actually happen, as she describes them, then why didn't she go to the police? She has his name and phone number. There would have possibly been witnesses or security footage of the assault. She has the text message proving harassment. At very least she could have got a restraining order. But no, it's much better to write an anonymous piece for XO Jane. That will fix the problem, no doubt. Next. I received another text after a few days of silence. He asked me to meet him because he wanted me. He was, after all, in his words, an honest, nice guy who just needed a chance. You know, I would actually find this type of fiction funny, due to its poor quality, if it wasn't for the idiots that take it seriously. Personally, I'm always very skeptical about any unsupported claims I read on the internet. And I like to think I have a well-developed bullshit detector, and I have to call bullshit on this one. Speaking of bullshit, we have another article from one cat. Oh boy. This one is called Men's rights activists gather to fight misandry, drink some brews, bro out. By Gary Legum. Wow, I'm sure Gary here is going to be totally impartial, and address real issues, right? Yeah, maybe not. Too bad we haven't yet made our big move to Detroit, because this international conference on men's issues that was held there this weekend sounds like a total hoot. Who wouldn't have fun in a room full of angry shut-ins embittered because the harlot to whom they had entrusted their bank accounts and their mighty seed took the kids and all the money and went to live in her sister's place in Des Moines? Oh look, Gary is creating negative stereotypes, because he doesn't have any real arguments. Good one, Gary. What's next? Attendees numbered in the low 3 figures, though we're not sure if media figures are included in the count. Among the poor bastards who got to expense a lovely summer weekend in Detroit was MSNBC's Adam Serwer, who should receive some sort of medal for sitting through this. Barbara Kay, a columnist for Canada's National Post, argued that rape on college campuses was a myth perpetrated by man-haters, and the concept of rape culture, how society can tacitly approve of or rationalize sexual assault, was baseless moral panic. The vast majority of female students allegedly raped on campus are actually voicing buyer's remorse from alcohol-fueled promiscuous behavior involving murky lines of consent on both sides, she said, drawing chuckles from the audience. It's true. It's their get-out-of-guilt-free card, you know, like Monopoly. The chuckles turned to guffaws. Oh look, Gary is cutting and pasting from another so-called journalist, because Gary is too lazy to actually watch any of the online footage before forming an opinion. It's just easier to copy what others think, rather than doing it for yourself, isn't it, Gary? Good one, Gary. What's next? Yeah, right. Wonkette is shocked to learn that a female Vice reporter wasn't more sympathetic to a bunch of whiny jackholes complaining that feminism has ruined manhood by daring to advocate for women to be treated as full-fledged human beings and not underpaid, overworked fetus incubators with no agency over their bodies and their reproductive decisions. We're also shocked she could not feel the groundswell of this burgeoning movement that is so important its opening conference couldn't even half fill a meeting hall at a VFW in Detroit. Oh look, Gary is oversimplifying and distorting things, so as to avoid an actual conversation about actual issues. Because we all know that Gary's brand of ideology is beyond question or debate, because it's Gary's brand of ideology, and all other opinions can just take a seat at the back of the bus, no conversation required. Good one, Gary. What's next? Maybe if the men's rights movement wants to be taken seriously, it shouldn't invite to its conferences speakers who are going to opine on how circumcision is genital mutilation. Particularly if that speaker is a creepy libertarian who publishes his essays on Lew Rockwell's website, once called Feminism Socialism with Panties, and blames the Jews for the rise of communism. Otherwise, people might think it's nothing more than a bunch of angry right-wingers smarting because they couldn't pay for their entire trip with Bitcoin. Yep, can't believe we're not taking this more seriously. Oh no, Gary just implied that circumcision isn't genital mutilation. Does that include female circumcision, Gary? Gary couldn't be belittling the pain and suffering of females who are circumcised against their will, could he? Of course not, because everyone knows that the pain and suffering of females counts. Gary was only belittling the pain and suffering of infant male children, and we all know they just don't count, do they, Gary? Well, fuck you, Gary. Next. And it just gets worse. The Anatomy of a Men's Rights Activist. By Megan Keister. In case you don't know who Megan Keister is, she is not only a columnist for Vice, but she is also a comedian.
It's just that easy to write a joke, ladies and gentlemen. I got another idea. It's basically an hour 30 of a elderly Oriental man masturbating. I call it ancient Chinese secretions. Come on! It's references, right? You guys like references? Okay. I don't really care. Hey, how's it going? Hey, hi. Let me tell you a little something else about myself. I am, as a matter of fact, I am crazy in the sack. I'm pretty crazy in the sack. A lot of women will tell you they're crazy in the sack, but I actually am. Every time I'm about to perform coitus with another human being, not gendered, with another human being, I just hunker down and I go, baba oo mow mow, baba oo mow mow. Everybody heard about the bird. Have you ever heard the bird? The bird is the word. I'm crazy in the sack, you guys. I'm sorry I got so upset. I will leave you guys with a couple impressions. America loves impressions. My first impression is of a polite misogynist. Polite misogynist. Bitch, please. My second impression is of former President Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers, former President Benjamin Franklin. Porn is proof that God loves us and wants us to be horny.
Correction. She claims to be a comedian. Unfortunately, she is as talented as a journalist as she is as a comedian. So I seriously suggest you pause this video for a moment and get a strong drink, because we are about to take a trip into the land of straw men and feminist make-believe.
There is a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge.
Anyway, on to the article. He is a good guy, much to his detriment. Women, after all, don't want good guys. This is due, of course, to the inherent lack of goodness they possess. They are single-minded, status-obsessed, and materialistic. They want men with fancy cars and big dicks, men who don't understand them the way our man can, the way he would, if only they'd look his way. They don't look his way, however, because they're too busy vainly looking at themselves in mirrored surfaces or at the big dicks of their inferior boyfriends. I wonder, does she mean something like this?
Would you like Kim and Dave to find love for you? Like The Bachelorette.
Oh,
we find love for Jackie.
Let's find love now. They must have heaps of cash and they've got to have a package between their legs, let's be honest. And I don't need them to speak. They don't even need to speak.
You don't want a man who speaks.
There you go. Jackie Lambie likes a well-packed lunchbox. 13.27 if you fit that bill. We had Jackie Lambie, the senator with the Palmer United Party from Tasmania, on Power to the People this morning. She revealed she hasn't been in a relationship for 11 years. Dave hit her up and said, look, would you like us to find you love? She had a few key points about any man. They need to be rich. They need to have a well-packed lunchbox, and she doesn't want them to talk too often. Okay.
Now, Jackie just happens to have hung around. She's had something else she had to do. So, Jackie, hello again.
Oh, good morning again. Should have done a runner.
You should have done a runner. I see this is like The Bachelorette. You're The Bachelorette. Won't this be a great story for New Idea? if you found love on the Kim and Dave show. Good morning, Jamie.
How you going?
You put your hand up you're the first man who's got enough courage to put your hand up and say, look, I'd go out with Jackie. How old are you?
22.
22?
Yeah.
Would you like to be a cougar, Jackie?
Oh, I tell you, I'm not sure about the cougar thing, but yeah, toy boy, I never really thought about it, to be honest.
What are you liking, Jackie?
I don't know. I've never met her.
That's the whole thing, isn't it? It's the mystery. Have you ever been out with an older woman?
Yes, I have.
Do you have a trouble with powerful women? Because Jackie is now a federal senator.
Oh, no, I haven't got a problem with that.
Okay. Now, Jackie, you've got some questions for him, I think.
Do you have plenty of cash? I'm just a bit concerned at 22 years of age and living in Tasmania, you mightn't be quite there yet.
Yes, I do, actually.
You do?
How come?
I inherited quite a small fortune, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, question 2, Jackie.
Now she's becoming more interesting by the minute.
Question 2.
And I guess that I'm just a bit concerned because you're so young that I'm not sure you're able to handle Jackie Lambie.
I've been about a fair bit, eh?
Oh, have you at 22?
Yeah. Well,
you don't have any diseases, do you?
No.
Okay. Now, there was a crucial question that you said was crucial for a partner, Jackie.
Oh, yes. I guess, are you well hung?
Hung like a donkey.
Is that right?
Well,
yeah, I've got a 24-year-old son that reckons he is too. He says that as well.
21st century, we all are now.
Now, Would
2
you be
out of
willing
3
to go,
ain't bad.
if we can line up a date, would you be willing to go on a date with Jackie?
Yeah, it depends when it is. I fly to Brisbane next week, but...
Yeah, what,
For
how
2
long are you
weeks.
up there for?
2 weeks.
Okay, Jackie, would you be up for a date? We'll
coffee.
It's all at our cost. Next time you're in
You
Hobart.
guys are going to kill me. Well, I'd have to
A
consider
breakfast
that.
date. A breakfast date on the Kim and Dave show.
Maybe a breakfast date. I
Okay.
guess I'd see my 24-year-old son now. He'd be cringing by about now.
Okay, okay, Jamie, we're going to arrange a breakfast date with you. Are you up for it? Jamie?
He's done a runner. Scared him off
No,
already.
He's up for it.
He's up. I have that effect on the men.
That interview was from about 3 weeks ago with Australian Senator Jackie Lambie. Let's have a look at what she said again. On Tuesday, Senator Lambie appeared on a Hobart breakfast program where she was asked about her ideal man. The PUP senator for Tasmania replied, "They must have heaps of cash and they've got to have a package between their legs." She also asked a caller into the show who said he was willing to go on a date with her if he was well hung. Personally, I'm not offended by what she said, I see it just as a joke. But there was some controversy over her comments by the media and general public. Needless to say, if a male politician had have said his ideal woman was busty, and knew how to keep her mouth shut, it would have been the end of his career. It's also not a great surprise that Jackie Lambie was defended by feminists. Feminist commentator Eva Cox appeared unfussed by the comments. She's not the sort of person you expect great finesse and politeness from, Ms. Cox told the Launceston Examiner. I think men can take care of themselves when we talk about their private parts. Maybe it will encourage them to be less frank about their own comments. Typical really. But back to the point. Are there women out there who are status-obsessed and materialistic, who want men with fancy cars and big dicks? Obviously. Just as there are guys out there who are more interested in the size of a woman's tits than the size of her IQ. There are even dating sites set up for this type of thing. Personally, I think women like this should be avoided, and I don't see anything wrong with discussing it. And I would tell all my female viewers, and I know there are some of you out there, to avoid any male who is more interested in your breast size than your IQ. Yes, there are people of both sexes who have either shallow or unrealistic expectations of what they want or deserve in a partner. And these people should be avoided, because it isn't going to end well for you. Having said that though, I don't personally think everyone is like that. Unfortunately, there does seem to be an ever-increasing number of people who are though, particularly when it comes to unrealistic expectations. I'm sorry, but if you think you deserve everything, then chances are, you don't. Especially if you have nothing to offer in return. But of course, this is just unfunny Megan Keister warming up, by starting off with a, all MRAs are sad, lonely and jealous straw man. Next. They don't want him, so why does he want them? The answer is simple, he wants what he deserves. And he deserves them. Because he is a good guy, again, much to his detriment. I mean, do you know how many goddamn times he's been put in the friend zone? Do you have any concept of how emasculating it is to comfort a woman you know could be one in a series of the loves of your life as she cries over another man? For the sheer psychic anguish of this emasculation, he at least deserves a hand job. But he doesn't get a hand job. He gets nothing. And he's tired of it. You'll notice she doesn't refer to any men's rights issues, she only makes a personal attack on our personalities. Are we to believe that we are only men's rights activists, not because of issues like male genital mutilation, the sentencing gap, male homelessness, male suicide, male victims of sexual assault and domestic abuse being ignored, or child custody and the corruption of the family court system, but in fact, we are men's rights activists because of a lack of pussy? I'm assuming this includes those MRAs who are in relationships, those who are also MGTOW and don't want to be with women, those who are homosexual, and those who are female. Are we to believe that these MRAs, along with everyone else who uses the title, is only part of the movement due to lack of pussy and not the real issues? In other words, pussy is of higher value than male suffering in the eyes of Megan Keister. It seems in her opinion, getting laid, or should I say, not getting laid, is a much more important issue than actual men's human rights issues. But I have no doubt she knows her argument is false. I have no doubt she is just trying to distract, and to paint a degrading false image of all MRAs, as it's easier than acknowledging that men have real issues, or trying to debunk those issues. Essentially it's lazy, and dishonest. And reminds me of this. Personally, I think using comedy, and even lampooning your opposition, can be an effective way to get your point across, as well as pointing out the flaws in your opposition's argument. But it should have some basis in reality. If instead of lampooning your opponent's actual argument, you instead create a false argument to tear down, you have moved from the realm of comedy, into that of propaganda and straw men. It also helps if your comedy is funny, a lesson that both Megan Keister and Saturday Night Live could learn. Next. He is, indeed, tired. Tired of being persecuted for the fact that he was born into a world of privilege, one he cannot change, because, Jesus fucking Christ, he's only one man, and what can one man do? Nothing, especially when he's constantly surrounded by harpies incessantly yammering that he's the problem. A man can concentrate in the midst of all this yammering. And anyway, he's not the problem. He's the solution, for fuck's sake. Why won't anyone listen to him? Is it because they're scared of the truth? That's probably it. Fucking cowards. Sheeple. Wake the fuck up, he thinks to himself, shaking his head as he hate-reads a Jezebel article. Oh look, it's the, you're privileged just because you were male, so shut the fuck up, argument. If this was a legitimate argument, then no one from the first world should be able to comment on the third world. After all, are not we all privileged compared to them? Once again we see the collective groupthink that lumps all people of one group together, no matter the individual circumstances of each individual in the group, no matter the facts, or reality. In the eyes of a feminist such as Megan Keister, all men are privileged over women, including those men who are homeless, those who have their genitals forcibly mutilated as babies, those who are given longer jail sentences, just for being male, those who are separated from their children by the courts, and even those who can't cope and commit suicide. Strange kinds of privilege, methinks. Next. Yeah, he has a fedora, but who gives a shit? Why are people always making fun of it? His head just looks good in hats. I mean, if it didn't, he wouldn't wear hats, but it does, so he does. The same goes for his chin beard. Some faces just look better with hair on them. Whenever he shaves, he looks like a little boy. But with a chin beard, he looks like the man that he is. The man no one could argue he is not. Wow, she really is pulling out all the tired old stereotypes, isn't she? Fedoras? Really? I don't know of any men's rights activists who wear fedoras. I don't even know where this fedora myth came from. It just shows how out of touch these people are with what the men's rights movement really is. And of course, following this paragraph is a photo of some men's rights activists. Let's see how many fedoras we can spot. He doesn't have a lot of followers on Twitter, but that isn't why he tweets. He doesn't tweet for attention. Okay, maybe he does tweet for attention, but not personal attention. His identity doesn't matter, that's why his handle is just a string of random letters and numbers, why his avatar is an illustration. He's altruistic enough to understand his personal insignificance. He tweets to bring attention to the cause. Okay. So now it sounds like she is talking about social justice warriors or online feminists. Next. He tweets to stand up for what is right, what is true. He tweets the things he's tired of men like him being told they cannot say. Which is that insert woman name here is a cunt who needs to shut the fuck up, immediately. He tweets this directly at the cunt in question, because it is imperative for her to know she is a cunt. Really. he's doing her a service. No one else is willing to tell it like it is. Oh boy. Yeah, because feminists are never abusive on Twitter, no never happens, and they never say anything deserving a negative response. Let's be honest here, folks. Both sides get abusive, both sides get angry, both sides attack one another, and I'll even go as far as to say both sides bait each other, hoping for a response. It seems the difference is, at least in the eyes of Megan Keister, that when feminists are abusive, it's justified, it's their right, and they are never ever wrong, and shouldn't be called out on their bullshit, whereas, MRAs being abusive, is never justified, even in response to abuse, and of course they never have a valid point anyway. Welcome to the world of feminist double standards. Next. He types, all day, into the endless void that is the internet. It is a void not unlike the void that exists between the thighs of his objects of desire, those unattainable cunts he constantly tries to outhit, outsmart, capture, crush. Once again, no real men's rights issues have been discussed, instead we have nothing but personal attacks and character defamation. Instead of acknowledging actual issues, it's just easier to rely on ad homs and straw men. Well done, Megan, you are as good a journalist as you are a comedian. Next. The cunts of these cunts, they are the holy grails of his bitterness and resentment. Were he to win one, he would immediately fill it with high-octane, over-caffeinated energy drinks, fuel he'd use to post more blog entries about how, actually, just as many women commit domestic violence as men, but the media refuses to acknowledge it, and how rape culture is a myth perpetrated by the unrapeable, that is fat chicks, and how, not only does something called the glass cellar fucking exist, it's even worse than the glass ceiling, and how custody discrimination is making an entire generation of helpless children pawns in a game they're too innocent to realize they're playing. Suffering under the dreadful rule of their selfish mothers, and so on, and so on. These blog entries are invariably accompanied by stock photos of smiling, non-threatening men and women interacting with each other in a pleasant, respectful manner. They do not sync up to the content they are being partnered with. Oh wow. She actually got around to mentioning some actual issues, albeit in a sarcastic, dismissive manner. But let's look at these a bit closer. The first one, women commit domestic abuse as often as men. There are many studies from across the Western world that acknowledge this, as I pointed out in a recent video, the latest of which comes from the UK. Domestic violence against men, women more likely to be intimate terrorists with controlling behavior in relationships. Relationships can be an emotional roller coaster. Throughout the ride, men and women can be everything from loving and nurturing, to sometimes verbally and even physically abusive during fights. While aggression in heterosexual relationships is believed to stem from men, a recent study presented on June 25 at a symposium on intimate partner violence (IPV) at the British Psychological Society's Division of Forensic Psychology annual conference in Glasgow, found women are more likely to be intimate terrorists, or physically aggressive to their partners than men. The findings revealed just as many women as men could also be classed as abusive, coupled with controlling behavior with serious levels of threats, intimidation, and physical violence. Women were more likely to verbally and physically aggressive to their partners than men. The study found that women demonstrated a desire to control their partners and were more likely to use physical aggression than men. It wasn't just pushing and shoving, said Bates, medical XPRESS reported. Some of the survey respondents circled boxes for things like beating up, kicking, and even threatening to use a weapon. As for rape culture being a myth, once again, as I have pointed out in previous videos, even RAINN, the Rape, Abuse and Incest National Network, has denounced rape culture. And they are far from being men's rights activists. As for the glass cellar, well, why is it that the vast majority of those who are garbage collectors are male? When there is a lack of women in high-profile jobs, such as politics, or the STEM jobs, feminists dismiss personal choice on behalf of women, and claim instead discrimination. Yet they don't use the same line of reasoning when it comes to low-profile or dangerous jobs, like garbage collection, or coal mining. Why is it that feminists only see those men at the top, and not those at the bottom who do the undesirable or dangerous jobs? there is very much such a thing as the glass cellar. And of course, we come to child custody. Considering the already high male suicide rate skyrockets during a divorce, I think it's pretty fucking clear there is an issue here. More often than not, during a divorce, a woman just loses a husband, whereas a man loses his entire family. Simple solution: start creating equal shared custody laws, and I guarantee, all those nasty men's rights blogs talking about losing their kids, that seems to have Megan Keister so upset, will start to disappear. Next. When he is not creating his own content, he is sharing the content of others, or discussing content others have shared. He and his brethren commune on Reddit, commiserating about the struggle on message boards with names like the Red Pill, a discussion of sexual strategy in a culture increasingly lacking a positive identity for men, and the Pussy Pass, which documents women getting off lightly due to their vaginal impairment. Maybe instead of dismissing the Pussy Pass as some kind of misogynistic conspiracy, Megan, the want-to-be journalist, Keister, could have actually talked about the sentencing gap. Just a thought. But I guess that would actually require research and effort, as opposed to ideology and propaganda. Next. He has, indeed, taken the red pill. While his embrace of dime store philosophy has been liberating, it's also served to make him upset enough to type until his wrists hurt. His eyes are open now, and cannot be shut. He has entered the truest form of existence. He sees all, knows all. It is a tremendous burden, holding such knowledge and power. Sometimes, in his darkest hours, he wishes his eyes never opened. Those feelings dissipate, however, when he types about important things, valid things, with his fellow Redditors. They are the only ones who understand him. Dime store philosophy? Really? Then why does Megan Keister's entire article rely on nothing more than character assassination? So far she has only mentioned actual issues once in a single paragraph, and didn't even attempt to discuss them in a serious tone. If it's dime store philosophy, then it should be easy to dissect, right? But I guess that's something a real journalist would do, not someone just pretending. Next. It makes sense that he'd take the red pill. The Matrix, of course, is his favorite movie. The stark realities that film presented, the way in which it perfectly illuminated the illusion of ignorance that most people inhabit, Ayn Rand herself couldn't have written it better. Ayn Rand was a woman, sure, but she also hated women, and boy could she write, so he still loves her. It sucks that she wasn't also hot, but you can't win 'em all. He will, without a tinge of irony, mansplain feminism to a biological female. Feminism is equality, he says, which is something he desperately wants. He's tired of women running the show. He's tired of being vilified for his sex. He's tired of being misunderstood. He's tired, period. Oh boy. If it's wrong for a male to have an opinion on, or discuss feminism, with a biological female, then wouldn't it also be wrong for a feminist to have an opinion on, or discuss masculinity, with a biological male? Come to think of it, if a men's rights activist is wrong for having an opinion on, or discussing feminism, because he is not female, then isn't this article wrong, as it is a feminist, expressing her opinions on, and discussing the men's rights movement? Interesting set of double standards there, Megan Keister. It seems men are limited in what they are allowed to discuss, whereas women are not. Very interesting indeed. Next. He will go on to say that women have no reason to be scared when they walk alone at night. If they are, they're being irrational. And anyway, if they do end up getting raped, there's nothing they can do about it. Rape happens all the time in the animal kingdom, and we're animals. It's natural. When men rape, which is something they do far less than you think they do it solely because of their animalistic urges, which makes rape inevitable, inescapable. It is a necessary fact of life, like childbirth. Wow. She just goes further down the rabbit hole of crazy with every paragraph, doesn't she? Where to start? Let's see. Firstly, I don't doubt that women should be scared if they are walking alone at night. Unfortunately, I've seen all too many feminists claim that only women should be scared walking alone at night. Considering that men make up the vast majority of assault victims, and homicide victims, the vast majority of which are committed by strangers, I think it's pretty clear that her argument is backwards. She should be criticizing feminists for dismissing the danger to males, but of course that's something she would never do, because it would not only require her to criticize feminism, but also to acknowledge male victims, who are obviously invisible to her. The next claim she makes is that MRAs claim that rape is natural because it happens in the animal kingdom. Once again, I've never heard anything remotely like this ever come from an MRA. In fact, I think you'll find that we advocate for the acknowledgement of male victims of rape, something most of society, including many feminists, don't want to acknowledge. As for men raping far less than most people think, well yes, in a way that is true. Each rape does not equal one rapist. In other words, rapists usually commit multiple rapes each, meaning there are far fewer rapists than there are victims of rape. This is something that organizations like RAIN seem not to understand, thus they overrepresent the percentage of males who are rapists. Also, considering they admit that 60% of their figures come from surveys, many of which are very questionable, it's easy to conclude that we don't know the real number of rape victims. And that's not even including male victims, and what is considered rape and what is not. And then we come to the men rape due to animalistic urges claim. Funny enough, I've never heard anything even remotely close to that come from an MRA, but I've certainly heard it from some feminists, and even a fundamentalist Muslim cleric. But never an MRA. Just more utter bullshit from Megan Keister, the queen of bullshit. Next. He has something to say about what he's reading right now. And, by God, he's going to fucking say it, because I don't have the right to tell him otherwise. And why the fuck should you, Megan? When someone writes an entire article, based on absolutely no evidence, no arguments, no discussion, but just wall-to-wall bullshit and straw-man arguments, why wouldn't someone have something to say about it? If anyone ever wanted the perfect example of everything wrong with modern-day journalism, here it is. She doesn't even attempt to hide her lack of credibility. All she presents is attack after attack on the personalities of MRAs, trying to paint us all as sad and lonely little men. But is this unique to this particular article, or is this part of Megan Keister's writing style? Well, I came across this article, I'll let you be the judge. Hello, sir. I'm addressing you as such because you're a man. I mean, I could be wrong, as I'm sure you know, I often am, but statistically speaking, you're probably not a member of the fairer sex. Ah, but look at me. Not even a paragraph in, and I'm already generalizing. Does that upset you? I bet it does. You don't like me. But then again, you don't like most people. Or things. Or worldviews that don't align with your own. You thrive on being a contrarian. Contrarianism is, in a way, your religion. Because you sure as shit aren't a Christian, or a Muslim, or a Jew, or any of those people who believe in a higher power. You're higher than that high power. You're the highest. You, and only you, are the way, the truth, and the life. You hate, with a passion, that Lindy West Brogno, the one who's always flapping her gums about who gives a fuck over at that Jezebel rag. You think she's fat. You want her to know that you think she's fat. So you tell her that she's fat. Unrepeatably fat. Jeez Louise, ain't she fat? Where does she get off, being so fat? You're tired of being persecuted for your privilege. It's not your fault that you're white. Male. A member of the middle class. You've worked hard for everything you have, the mid-sized automobile, the two-bedroom ranch-style home in the suburbs you live alone in, the 50-inch plasma TV, the Pittsburgh Steelers season tickets. No one helped you with a goddamn thing. You, sir, suckle at no teat. There is no room in your life, in your world, in your heart, for people who don't pull their weight. You wish you were a fucking minority, you know? Or a woman. Or a gay. They have it so much easier than you. I mean, society never persecutes them. They're too busy giving them jobs and letting them into universities, unwarranted. Fucking quotas, am I right? Yeah, seems to be a bit of a pattern, doesn't there? No research, no facts, no arguments, no effort journalism. It's just schoolyard level name-calling dressed up as something important. Well, at least Meg thinks so. This is not journalism, it's just crap that any old arsehole can do without any great effort.
Honey, I'm home.
Oh, hey, sweetie. Glad you're home. Now, Carol just called me and told me that a client wants to meet me in half an hour for an emergency meeting. Do you mind watching Lila while I'm out at work?
You know, I'm really tired from work. I'd like a sandwich.
Honey, if I miss this meeting, my work will fall through.
I mean, why do you have any business working anyway? Shouldn't you be watching Lila? Isn't that your job?
Honey, let's not fight in front of the child.
And why are you dictating what I can and can't do? I've had enough of this oppression by women. Just because men control the government, get paid higher wages for doing the same jobs, and aren't sexualized from a young age, doesn't mean that I should have to watch a child that we both brought into this world consensually.
Honey, do you hear yourself? You're being ridiculous.
I need men's rights, and so does every other man out there that feels as oppressed as I do. That's why I, Jack Smith, founded the National Men's Rights Society of America, because we are fighting women's rights and women who believe that they can be as equal in society as men are. We proudly display our strong beliefs that the world needs to be rid of this feminist society. You there, you poor, oppressed, male soul! There is no need to fall under the rule of women who we, coincidentally, attempt to control. Join us on Wednesday, July 6th, as we picket outside of Victoria's Secret, because women shouldn't have the right to buy clothing that makes them feel body confident when us men are living so poor, tormented, and sad lives. Join the National Men's Rights Society today.